my name is Madeline and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be talking about some books that I have DNF'd somewhat recently and kind of why I chose to not finish those books and my thought processes kind of overall and how I decide books that I don't want to continue reading. I think it's a really important skill for a reader to develop, is how to determine if a book is not for you, because there is limited time and so many books out there that you don't really want to waste your time reading a book that you are not enjoying, or because you could be using that time to read something that you do enjoy. So I feel like it's an important skill to have, and I feel like I've really cultivated this over the past year or two. As my reading tastes have evolved and changed, I've learned better how to anticipate the kinds of things that I am not going to enjoy in a story, and how to kind of know when to take a step away from a story and maybe choose not to finish it either for the time being or maybe forever. So a quick little disclaimer, I am getting over a bit of a sickness and I just got back from a nice walk outside, which was lovely and refreshing and so good, but I am a little out of breath now. So if you pick up on any of that, that is why. Hopefully I will be able to make it through this video okay. But anyway, what kind of prompted me thinking about this video was that I DNF'd 3 books in a row, which is pretty enormous for me. I feel like I don't have a problem DNFing a book. Some people really don't want to stop reading a book, they want to finish it. I don't really have that problem. I'm fine stopping a book. But I haven't DNF'd that many books this year, definitely less than 10. And so doing it 3 times in a row was really shocking to me and made me kind of think, like, what is going on? What is wrong? And so I wanted to kind of take a look at the kinds of books I chose to not continue reading over the past couple of months and chat with you about them and kind of see if I could find some similarities and figure out what is going wrong kind of in my reading and why I'm picking up books that I am choosing to stop so often. So without further ado, let's just get into the books. So the first book up that I wanted to talk about, and this is a recent DNF. I'll talk about those 3 that I DNF'd all together. I'll talk about those first, and then I'll kind of work my way backwards a bit. But anyway, one of those first ones that I DNF'd was Miss Morgan's Book Brigade by Jeanette Skilsine Charles. So I was really excited about this book. I talked about it in a fall TBR video. This was on my fall TBR, and I had high hopes for this. It's World War I historical fiction. Our main character is a children's librarian who goes to France and is helping to rebuild these devastated communities. So it sounded great on paper. And the book started off pretty good. I enjoyed the World War I storyline. There's also a 1980s, more like modern day storyline, and I did not enjoy that as much, but it was fine. It was much smaller of a part of the story than the World War I, so I was kind of fine just making my way through it. But what kind of caused me ultimately to set this book aside was some of the romance included in it. There was a fade to black scene, and then I just kind of had this sneaking feeling that that wasn't going to be it. So I did some digging on Goodreads and found out that there was a much more explicit open door scene later on in the book, and I knew that wouldn't be for me and that it would really kind of turn me off of the book and make it a much lower rating, so I chose to just stop it because I knew I would just get frustrated at that point when I came to that. And it was so frustrating because I felt like this was not needed in the storyline. It did not add anything to it. In fact, in my opinion, it took away from the amazing true story that this is and just made it feel, I don't know, it just took away and it did not add. So it was kind of a disappointment to me, and I was really, really upset when I had to stop this because I got like 30% of the way through and it just felt so disingenuous to the time period, and just, it felt so bad. So I was really bummed by this, and yeah. And I was kind of in a historical fiction reading mood. So all three of these books are actually historical fiction. And the next one I DNF'd was A Girl Called Samson. I will put a picture of it up. And this one was a DNF for completely different reasons. Miss Morgan's book Brigade was romance scenes that I did not like. This was not the case at all for A Girl Called Samson. This book is American Revolutionary historical fiction. And I loved the setting. I loved kind of the idea of the book, but I just was not invested at all in the story. I did not care about our main character. And it got to the point, I feel like this isn't a spoiler because on the cover you see that she's dressed as a soldier. So you kind of anticipate that she is going to pretend to be a boy and enlist in the war. But I got to the point where like we were at the cusp of her doing this, and I didn't really care one way or another whether or not she enlisted. I had no interest really in this story, and I decided at that point, if I don't really care whether or not she decides to pretend to be a boy and be a soldier, I should probably just stop this book because this is what it's going to be about from here on out. So I was kind of bummed. I heard really good things about this, and it just, I don't know, it just wasn't right for me. There's nothing technically bad about the book. It has a lot of faith elements and things that I could have really enjoyed, but it just fell a little flat for me for some reason. The third historical fiction is another DNF for a completely different reason, which I'm starting to see maybe there's not much of a pattern. We'll have to see with the other ones. But this one was The War That Saved My Life. This is a middle grade World War II historical fiction, and I did not know very much about this going in. I had heard it recommended somewhere. I don't really even remember where at this point. And I DNF'd this, I think, in the second chapter. So I was not very far at all. But in the very beginning, we are introduced to our main character. I forget her name. She has a brother, and they live with their mom. And she has this disability that basically makes her not able to walk. And she is terribly treated, abused by her mother, physically, and it was terrible to read about. It was very descriptive. We had her mother beating her and starving her, and at one point she was ready to lock her in a cupboard, and that's when I had to put the book down because I just could not keep reading at this point. It was so terrible to read about. I had a hard time with that one. And I know books should deal with hard things that are real life, but sometimes it's just not something I want to read about, and it was just affecting me, and so I had to set that one down. Alright, so those were the three that I kind of DNF'd really quickly together. And then I had to go back a little ways because, like I said, I don't typically DNF books that often. It does happen, but not at that kind of rate. So another one that I kind of stopped recently was Cole and Layla Are Just Friends. This was a book that I talked about again in my fall TBR. I was super excited for it. It looked like it had such cozy fall vibes. It's a rom-com set in New York City, and I did not get very far into this one either. A couple of chapters, and it just was not for me. I could not connect to either Cole and Layla. Something was not right in this book for me. I was not invested in their friendship. I had no desire really to see them fall in love, so I just stopped the book, which was a bummer because I didn't even get to the part that's set in New York City, which is kind of what I was most excited for, but that's okay. Two books that were audiobooks that I DNF'd, mostly because I think I just wasn't enjoying them very much on audio, and sometimes that's the case. Sometimes it's just an issue of format, and it's a book that I would rather read digitally or physically, and I would enjoy it much more that way. So the first was The Last Map Maker. This is it middle grade or YA? I don't know. It's fantasy. I would say it's maybe YA fantasy, but I'm not sure. And I was enjoying this for a while, and eventually I just kind of got into a rut and wasn't wanting to pick it up and listen to it. And so yeah, maybe I will try it again on on Kindle because I was enjoying it. There wasn't anything like bad about this book. It's about a young girl who is from a very impoverished background, and she gets this apprenticeship with a map maker kind of by some strange circumstances, and eventually sets out with him on this sailing expedition to chart this unknown territory that's kind of been a myth. And so it was a lot of fun. I enjoyed a lot of different aspects about this story, and especially when we got on the ship and their journey. So maybe I would pick this back up, like I said. We'll see. And then the second one that I DNF'd as an audiobook was Premeditated Myrtle. And this was another one I had high expectations for because I really like mysteries, and I read the Aggie Morton, the first book in the Aggie Morton series, which I think is very similar to Premeditated Myrtle, and I enjoyed that, so I was excited for this, but I think the audio format just didn't work very well for me, and that's because there are some footnotes in the book, and I think it would be much more funny reading the footnotes as opposed to listening to the footnotes. So this is one I definitely need to try again, reading with my eyes and not with my ears. It's fun. We have a young girl who is trying to solve a what she believes is a murder of her neighbor, and everyone is just telling her no, she just died of natural causes, she's old, and Myrtle is determined that she was murdered, and she is going to prove it. And she is a spunky little girl who is super fun, and I really enjoyed a lot of things about this book, so it is definitely one that I would want to try to pick up in another way. Alright, that's it for my little video about some books that I've DNF'd recently. I think it's interesting to think about why somebody chooses not to finish a book, and like I said, and just because these books weren't for me doesn't mean they won't be for you. Maybe you might love them and enjoy them, and that's so interesting because what doesn't work for one person can work really well for another person in a book. But it was interesting, and I enjoyed kind of thinking a little bit about why I chose not to finish these books. Some of them I might pick up in the future, and it would be interesting to see if my opinions change and if I feel like it was worth continuing on and finishing the book. But that is it for now. I will see you in the next video. Bye!